Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited today to be joined by Theologian. She's got a video going massively viral on TikTok with 2.5 million views discussing why the election of Pope Leo is a massive win for Catholicism and a rebuke to Christian nationalism. It's Leigh Larson. How are you?
Howdy. Howdy, folks. Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Were you surprised at the views rolling in on this video discussing why you think this is a good pick?
I was for two reasons. One, it is pretty long for TikTok. It's like 4.5 minutes or so, when our attention spans are less than a minute. So that, for one, surprised me to just see the retention rate on how long people were watching the video. But I also didn't. Yeah, I was also curious that people would make that connection. So it was cool to see people quickly like, okay, so this is a good thing, because I think right now we're kind of self-loathing Americans with everything.
Yeah, we've never had, it's like you get these popes, they in English might not be their first language, and it's to have a homegrown pope. This is so interesting. And of course, the first thought people had was, well, what's the Pope's politics? Because politics is so important to the message they deliver. What was the feeling like as it sort of information rolled in that you think this might be a Pope that has the values that you're looking for?
That's a tricky statement. At the end of the day, he's still Catholic, right? It's not. I made the mistake of saying socially progressive, and I think that was. I should have been more clear that, like, socially progressive, but not for American standards. But we're even, like, I don't know, sort of Western European standards. But when we think about, like, that there are still women dying from female genital mutilation, or queer folks dying in Catholic dioceses, and he's speaking out against that, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. A lot of popes in the past, not necessarily Pope Francis, but this Pope has spoken out against that, and that's moving the needle, quote unquote, within Catholicism. But also, I appreciate that he's a moderate Republican out of Chicago. I grew up in Texas. I served in the military. I mean, like, it's Republican. I guess that's part of the world view that I grew up with. But specifically, MAGA has just taken it and run with it to where that it's hard to even identify it as the same party. So to see someone kind of hold a line and recall and going back to small government, or speaking out against, like, some of even, like, the nastiness about Trump and Vance, I've been like, okay, like, I appreciate seeing someone from that side speaking out against that. So
yeah, it's pretty wild, right, to see how you've basically got Trump, who's never seen the inside of a church in his life. He's everything that the Catholics would hate in a person: multiple marriages, cheating, scandals, this, that, and the other, right? And yet somehow he's attached himself to this evangelical world. I mean, and then as soon as he becomes president again, he's fighting with this bishop, who's one of the most brave people I've seen, as she speaks to their right in front of them. She doesn't bend the knee, and she says, like, we need to, have compassion for the poor. And then you see JD Vance look at his wife, like, ready, trying to get a reaction. And everyone's like this, it became political right away. First day of presidency, an hour after the inauguration. So what are your thoughts about this hijacking of Christianity by a large swath of the country?
Yeah. Great question. I actually had the opportunity to go to Easter service at Washington National Cathedral and shake hands and take a picture with Bishop Buddy. And that's what I told her. I was like, thank you. Like, what else are pastors supposed to do but advocate for the poor, the marginalized, and to speak out against the state? There will always be that tension between the religion and state. Now, it's obviously in history morphed into one. In America here, it's separate, or as we want it to be separate. And as this movement is showing, they are trying not for it to be separate. And it's wild to know that there's, like, such a long history going all the way. I mean, we can go all the way back technically to the beginning, but in modern day, we see it especially with prayer in schools starting in 1925, and then with segregation in the 60s and 70s. And then there's Reagan, and they basically gave Reagan the handbook and said, go with it. And he did. And so this wild, like, very hierarchical, very divisive, very separatist Christian hijacking that is completely dismissive of the very things that Jesus talks about, the caring for the poor, the refugee, the immigrant, uplifting everyone, speaking out against the state, and they've co-opted it to become, instead of worshiping that message, it's now worshiping the state, it's worshiping empire, it's worshiping Trump, and making excuses and twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to, justify that he's just a flawed human and he's worthy of forgiveness and, for his sins. And I'm like, okay, but you're letting the sins happen. Like, that's, what do you talk? There's no accountability. There's no, like,
Right, that's what it comes down to, is accountability and the hypocrisy
yeah.
of a party that was always kind of put morality at a high ground. And you see this with like leaders of churches. There'll be scandals that come out. I'm a mere mortal, and there'll be these multimillionaire preachers and the sneaker culture that comes from preachers. Like, they've all got cool sneakers now. That you see this idea where they've won the cool I don't know, culture, but but like I've said this for a while too. It's like, well, what would Jesus have wanted? And
Yeah.
you see Pope Leo just a few months ago as a cardinal discussing that there needs to be a more compassionate way, if to handle immigration. Like, there has to be. So what was it like finding out that it was going to be Pope Leo, and then probably the first time ever having a pope that has a Twitter history where you can actually see where they stand on issues?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I appreciated, a quick Twitter search and seeing that he said JD Vance was wrong. I was like, cool. Like, whatever you got, like, we're already on the same road, whatever. And I feel like we're going to, disagree on other things, but, like, I'm glad that we share this, like, sort of, I don't, common enemy sounds very dramatic, but, like, I don't know what else to call it. Like, he and I both, and other people, do not agree with JD Vance. That's, like you said, like, the rolling of the eyes when the Episcopal priest, the Episcopal Bishop Buddy, called out Trump for wanting to care for the marginalized and looking at his wife. And
That was one of the most offensive things to me, to be quite honest, because you get a glimpse of what it probably looks like behind closed doors. And it was the same thing that JD ended up doing to Zelensky in the Oval Office. Just and by the way, JD Vance is a converted Catholic. He's been here for a day or two. You've got the 267th Pope comes in. JD Vance, one of the last people to see Pope Francis before he passes, and then all of a sudden there's tweets of now Pope Leo, not even being political, just saying, you're wrong. You cannot put your own family ahead of others. That's not what Jesus would have
right.
wanted.
Yeah, the
And so
ranking.
now people are at a crossroads where they have to. And my own family's this way, where they've kind of drifted MAGA, and my church I used to go to has drifted MAGA. And it's like, well, what are you going to do now? Are you going to take the side of the new pope, or are you going to call him a woke Marxist? Like, what's
Yes.
it going to be?
I know. And I think, because I was looking at, like, well, you asked earlier about what do I think about his name as well. Pope Leo, that name, the first Pope, great Pope Leo, back in the 400s, met with, this is a cool lineage, a cool story. He met with Attila the Hun, to dissuade Attila the Hun from attacking his people. Um, and that's the great Pope Leo of the 400s. And then the Pope Leo the 13th, I want to say, I'm getting my Roman numerals mixed up, sorry. At the turn of the century, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, spoke out against these capitalist titans that were putting their laborers through just horrible labor conditions and not giving back to their communities and just scraping American earth and resources for everything that could, and spoke out against that. Like, he was someone for the laborer. And so, and now to see this Pope already have a solid stance, or a firm stance, on immigration and how we treat the immigrant, with the tradition of speaking out against capitalist giants and against military warlords. Like it's just, I'm like, oh, okay, so you're here to fight. Like, you pick that name. That's a name. Like, so I think it's really telling, just his name. and the tradition that it holds within the Catholic papal history. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting as Pope Francis, after he passed, said he was going to donate his Pope mobile to help kids in Gaza, and of course that's a great symbol. But the Catholic Church is so incredibly wealthy and powerful. There's starvation happening, of course, all over the world in different places. But with the modern social media, we're seeing these emaciated kids on our screens. How do you have any ideas of what the church can do to just march in there and feed them?
right. Let alone like using their own budget is one just easy way to do that. There's also using their own budget and then advocating against, like I said, going back to these capitalist giants. Like, why are we throwing out food, or sorry, why are we starving when Walmarts exist, when we're throwing out food from restaurants? Like, there's so many like that it's grotesque. How are there food deserts when we have massive amounts of food, but we can't give that food to everybody? And
It seems like our current administration is like real gung ho capitalism, and government's not always meant to make a profit. Like USAID and other organizations, they're not meant to make money. They're meant to give to other people. And the selfish reason would be, well, if we're helping others, maybe they won't be sick and maybe they won't be war torn. And then it makes us safer and the whole world is better. And you see this idea of worlds kind of like walling up, and it's us versus them in trade wars. But really, like religion should, at its best, unite people to realize that, like the biggest beef I have with like my community I come from, it's like if there's someone who's sick or needy in my church I used to go to, they would be taken care of. But where are we to take care of the people that need the help that are not in that church? And I hope that there's just some way that maybe having a homegrown pope helps unify people to realize that the poor are not the ones that are robbing from our
no,
bank accounts and the middle class.
no. Yeah, the single mother who's working two jobs is not what's the problem here. I mean, that is a symptom of the problem, but that's not why anyone else is broke. And or struggling financially. It is absolutely, like you said, gung ho capitalism, profit at all costs. In fact, I just got back. I want to talk about homegrown Leo in just a second, but I want to make a quick point. I just got back from a theological conference where we were meeting in Appalachia in Tennessee about mining specifically. And there's all sorts of, the conversation about environmental regulations with mining has been going on forever. But the ministers, and these were ministers from all across the political spectrum. Some were like card carrying NRA, some were, far more left or progressive. But we were all trying to have this conversation about how when you like you want the congregation to have jobs. Like it's not that like, and unfortunately Appalachia has a lot of poverty and mining might be the sole form of income for a lot of people. So it's like, okay, you want those people to have jobs. But when you cut labor rights or unions or nickel and dime at workman's comp, when you are putting these people in very dangerous job sites like mining, where they're breathing harmful chemicals, where that stuff's getting in the groundwater, and then they have, well water, and then they're getting sick, and it's arsenic and lead, and people are having fertility issues, cancer, lung issues. Like, how is any of that Christian? Like, and not going after the person who just needs a paycheck, but going after like the employers. There's not a single Christian aspect of capitalism when it goes so unchecked and it removes all dignity of caring for their employees or their environment. So it was a really interesting conversation that it like how hopefully more and more, particularly someone like the Pope with that kind of influence, can speak out about how these practices simply aren't Christian.
And we talk about, there is a lot of pride that coal miners have, but
Mhm.
you have other countries like in Switzerland, they're laying solar panels down on all of their railroads. Now we don't have all of the railroads, but there's other ways, if it really is about just like having jobs in the energy world, that
Mhm.
people can, we can try to help people where they're not in such. I mean, mining's a great example because it's such a terrible condition, and of course,
Mhm.
similar things are happening with the healthcare fund for 9/11 first responders, where literally all of them have cancer, and now they're taking away some of the administration that's supposed to be there to help them after folks like Jon Stewart marched in the streets to try to get them the simple rights. So yeah, I mean, if I've made this argument a bunch about how I think if Jesus was around, he would be progressive. He would see all of this wealth that you could never possibly spend and say there's got to be a better way to dole this out. When did you feel a calling to discuss this? Now, you were in the Army as a progressive bishop. Is that correct?
I served in the Air Force Reserves as a chaplain candidate in the chaplain corps.
Sorry, I
Um,
was way off with that.
oh,
Sorry.
no, 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 it's totally fine. Yeah, it's a lot of different names, a lot of different things going on. Yeah, and I had an extremely hard time with the ministry, serving the airmen. Great, like loved it. I was requested by them. Folks asked me 3 or 4 times to give sermons and prayers and lecture. Like the ministry itself was great. Um, it was the bureaucracy in my chain of command that was predominantly Southern Baptist. And almost daily, I was being reprimanded for ministering to non Christians. I was told multiple times like that they did not believe that females should be pastors, but the US Air Force does. So I should be grateful for policy. Um, Questioning like why I should be here, like saying things like you're in defiance of Jesus because you're not in the kitchen, like you should be a dutiful wife instead.
Wow.
And I was like, I took that personally for a few years, but then I realized like almost every female chaplain that I went through training with or knew in my service is out of the military because they also experience like just as much of horror or worse treatment. Um, and I was like, okay, so this isn't personal. It's not like they just woke up and decided to hate me. It was just this is deep. Like this, they are truly trying to get rid of anything that I mean, and even there's a clause in the military for chaplains. It's called provide or provide for. And as a chaplain, you can either provide spiritual care, but if that person's lifestyle does not agree with yours, you can make a solid attempt to find spiritual care for them. And so on the surface, you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. But what happened, and basically what that translates to, is if you're a Southern Baptist chaplain and someone, and this doesn't happen all the time, it's not universal, but it happens. If you're a Southern Baptist chaplain and there is a gay soldier who is in the burn and amputee unit, you can elect not to visit them because they go against your faith. And you have to make quote unquote a solid attempt to find them spiritual care, but that solid attempt could be a phone call or an email. And if it doesn't go anywhere, then that's it. And especially if you're somewhere in like a more rural area where you're probably not going to find a rabbi or I'm just saying like other faiths, or you're not going to find a progressive pastor to go meet with them, that person's just going to not get spiritual care. And so there is like going back to what you said, this turning inwards and this isolating and this excluding and like, no, I'm not going to go and care for these people. Um, or if I do, I am going to try to convert them or I have my own agenda with it. And that's not how I am at all when I've ministered. I'm very much someone who just like listens and talks and then figures out where you stand with your thing, and we'll go from there. Um, and so anyway, like I said, I was really like, what is going on here? And then the more I read about it and had to do stuff for school on evangelicals in the military. There are plenty of American military chaplain books, and they don't even like written by evangelicals, and they don't even mention female chaplains in their history books. It'll be like chaplaincy in the United States military from World War II to modern day, and not a single thing about female chaplains or about any chaplains from any other faith. Um, And it'd be one thing if the book was titled Evangelical Chaplains or something, but there is an intentional erasure, and there's even like a very intentional, like, where they're in their books, they're talking about how religious pluralism should not be celebrated and how the military has made a massive mistake in allowing for different chaplains to sign up and serve. And I was just like, this is really big. And then it's kind of like you pull on one string and then you see how it's connected to everything else. And pretty soon I was like, they're going after everything. They're going in the military, like they're going in our healthcare, prayer in schools. Like this is really big.
And yeah, what you notice is it's hard to call it out because who doesn't want to be compliant to their faith? So when
Right.
you attach this like superiority or morality to the rules that you're making, or like you said, the erasing of women in leadership roles, it's like people don't want to be seen. And by the way, I'll get comments on this. Oh, you're criticizing Christianity. Would you criticize Islam? You see these talking points. There's only 5 of them, and they kind of just go, and it's like, and the more I make do commentary on this, the easier it is to debunk it all. But what's it like, taking your opinions to social media and finding an audience like that might agree with you more than, say, the pushback you might get from within the church?
Um, I that was part of why I didn't speak. I mean, I recently started posting about this. I started to talk about it maybe August or September, but it wasn't like this well thought out or clear. And then right before the election, I just got like galvanized, and I was like, I don't care anymore. Like the line in the sand has been drawn for me. Like I'm going for it. And then we saw how the election went, and that just like kind of furthered the fire. I was like, this thing is really bad, and they have deep pockets in the like the Trump administration. And so what's been really cool about it is I think there's an opportunity or some sort of wiggle room where, because I have this ministry background, I'm not wholesale going after Christianity, like, or religion in general. If you have a faith, like faith and religion can provide so much comfort and tradition and community for people. Um, it's not like a wholesale condemnation. Everyone just needs to go be atheist or something. It's more of just like, no, this is like, you have corrupted what it means to be Christian, first of all. And then you've turned around and imposed it on people. And so I get like the progressive moderate feedback of being like, oh, the progressive moderate Christian feedback of being like, thank you. Like, that's what I wanted. Like, they corrupted and hijacked my faith. And then you got the other people that are like, yeah, thank you. They're imposing it on us. And like, so it's been really cool to almost see a lot of unity. And then kind of like what you were saying, the talking points don't go very far. Like even like the pushback I get, it's like, we're not trying to infiltrate, we're just trying to spread the gospel. And I'm like, what? Like, you heard yourself, right? And or like, what's wrong? Like, or like, the question is like, what's wrong with having a faith? I didn't say anything about having an issue with having a faith. I'm saying don't impose it on other people. Don't have prayer in schools. Don't like.
It's kind of why I drifted far away from religion, and I'm just more spiritual.
Mhm,
And it's like I know where I stand, and have a
mhm,
good like idea of what the vibrant levels are at, and how I can help others and things like that. But I don't want to be attached to any religion that I see, not, like you said, not spreading faith, because they make it inclusive. Like, you have to follow. It's like the purity standards are so high that it shouldn't be that way. And hopefully the new pope is seeing that, and hope it seems as though the message they're sending with Pope Francis and now Pope Leo is this message that appeals to a broader audience, and
mhm.
gets back to the basic message of, like to wrap it all up, he might not be progressive in every way, but when it comes to wanting respect for our neighbors, even those that don't have US citizenship, it seems as though the US right now, the whole world's watching what's going on, and we
Yeah.
have a lot of sort of moral questions to answer, and like what side we want to be on in history.
And that's the thing is like that Catholic, like the Catholic Pope and I still do not see eye to eye on things, but I appreciate the spectrum and like just general coalition building. I don't think that we should all have the same shared necessarily I don't want to say values, but like we shouldn't all agree on the same thing. But I appreciate that as a quote conservative religious figure who has a history of voting Republican, he's now drawing the line in the sand of like, this is not acceptable. And like, and that's I see it as like an ally or some sort of support. And again, like we're not going to agree on a bunch of other things, but like you said, like I just appreciate the drawing in the line of the sand for him, that what is going on with Christian nationalism and just absolutely disgusting, unchecked capitalism, that Pope Leo XIV is calling it out. And he's saying, this is where we stand. And this is like, and not just him, but again, like Pope Francis, like this is not a fluke that the Vatican has done not just one, but two popes that are quote unquote socially progressive for the church, but meaning like they're speaking out against power. This is the Vatican making a very clear statement. It wasn't just a fluke with Pope Francis, but they're throwing their support behind Pope Leo XIV as well. So, yeah, absolutely. And and that's really what being allies is not all sharing the exact same ideas and sentiments, but having a common having a common enemy that we can all ally against. And right now, it's whatever this warped Christian nationalism has become.
Yeah. Well, look, I really appreciate you chatting with me today. Now, I know you're doing your thesis on Project 2025, which we don't have time to get into. So I'd love to have you come back to talk
Yeah,
about that sometime. You're
absolutely.
super fascinating, and it's no surprise you're going mega viral with your TikTok. The Holy Spirit is in the algorithm, folks. How can people follow you? TikTok, follow the leader, Leighdder, follow the leader. But where anywhere else we can promote your Substack?
Yeah, so my name is Leigh Larson. Follow the leader. It's a pun, Leigh, and I am on Instagram, YouTube, Substack, and TikTok. And I'll just kind of be bouncing around from there, doing short form writing and video. So uh, come follow.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.